This is Chapter 9, Part 2. We left off last time talking about some of the advantages of doing these structured interviews. And let's list a few more of these advantages here. We can talk about some disadvantages too later on. So there's accuracy that we've talked about before that can come from doing things in this structured way. And also the ease of data processing. So if we can accurately reduce your answers down to a score, a number that we then can put into a spreadsheet and analyze quantitatively, that's easy in terms of data processing. Compare that to the qualitative researchers who do, say, a 90-minute interview with you talking over various things. And so they might have to record that 90-minute conversation and then turn it into words transcribe it into words on a page so they can analyze your words written on the page. Well, you know, just imagine how many words that is if you're having a conversation for an hour and a half. That's pages and pages, maybe 30, 40, 50 pages of words that you have to process. And so that's much more labor intensive than just numbers, entering numbers into a spreadsheet. You know, that's pretty straightforward and less time consuming. That's one reason why we're able to get much bigger samples when we use these survey methods than the people who do these long qualitative interviews. Is we can just process a lot more answers. A typical quantitative study will have 300, 400, 500 people, and qualitative study only have 30. So we're able, so that's an advantage of the quantitative approach, is many process many more people, and as we've talked about before, large sample size is better. You're better able to generalize to the population with a larger sample, which is a very important thing to be able to do. You're able to reduce error when you have a larger sample. So, close-ended, pre-coded, or fixed choice questions. Again, we've talked about this before, where you limit the possible answers that people could give. Say that you could, the simplest is like yes or no. Well, how do you answer this? Yes or no? That's pretty simple. The interviewer does not interpret the responses before recording them. See, so it sort of takes the interviewer out of it. And it becomes more a mechanical process where hopefully you're just getting the pure truth from the person, and the interviewer's personality is kind of kept out of it. The standardized coding frame reduces variability in the coding procedure. And here again, we see these fancy words, reduces intracoder and intercoder variability. So intracoder is me. So when I mean coder, what are they talking about? We're talking about me taking your answer and turning it into a number. And if we have this really fixed, uniform system of, okay, you can only choose yes or no. If we'll give you a 1 for a yes and a 0 for a no. That's pretty straightforward. And so that simple rule right there that we follow in coding helps me to be consistent one day to the next. If I'm someone who's taking your answer, putting it into a number and putting it into a spreadsheet, that I should be able to, if I was to do that for you on one day, you said yes, and so on. Yesterday I got your answer, and I put a 1 down for you in the spreadsheet. I scored you as a 1. Well, I'm probably going to be able to do the same thing if I did it today instead. Even though I might be in a much worse mood today, my emotions don't have anything to do with it. A 1 is a 1 is a 1 is pretty straightforward. You said yes, so you get a 1. See, so that simplification and standardization should reduce how I code you. But on the other hand, if it's qualitative research and we have a big conversation and I have to translate what you say into a summary, well, basically, in a nutshell, they said this, right? Because you have to summarize. You have to, if it's 50 pages of talking, you got to break it down. And what's overall summary? What did they say? Well, one day I might interpret a little bit differently depending on my mood than the next day. So I might be more generous one day, or I might be less generous the next day, or more positive one day and more negative the next day. So you can get how I interpret and summarize in words what you said and boil it down may involve more of my personality and mood. So I might be different from one day to the next. That's intracoder differences, but also intercoder. So, if some other guy comes along and you said that yes to the question, and so he gives you a 1 and types a 1 in the spreadsheet for you, 1 meaning you answered yes. Doesn't matter whether it's him doing it or me doing it. We should give the same answer because it's very straightforward. But if he's interpreting an interview, a 90-minute interview with you, he may interpret a lot different than I do because we're different people. And if it's real open-ended and loose, it may depend as much on personality as anything else. So this is an advantage of the structured approach, is that the rules are very set, black and white, and it sort of takes the personality and the mood of the researcher, the coder in this case, out of it. Interview context. Now, one related sort of research that we do in this area, especially in sort of like political science, when people want to find out your political attitudes, who you're going to vote for, why you're going to vote a certain way, they like to do what's called these focus groups, group interviews, focus groups, where they'll have not just talk to you on the telephone, but maybe have 8 or 10 people sitting in a room where we have a conversation. And or maybe I ask questions and ask you to raise your hands depending on how you feel about it. How many people agree with me? Raise your hand. That kind of stuff. So if it's more structured and there's a list of questions that I have to follow and set answers and that kind of thing, then it's more of a structured interview. You can do it in a looser or more qualitative way too, or let's just have a conversation and not follow any strict schedule. So these focus groups can be more qualitative too. So it goes either way. But here we're talking about where it's really structured. So that's a different variation of this, is if you have one person interviewing a whole bunch of people at the same time, or maybe you have 3 or 4 interviewers interviewing people at the same time. So there's variations here you should be aware of. But most of the time when you get these sort of quantitative structured surveys, it's usually one-on-one, or it's one person taking that survey at a time, doing that interview at a time. Could be on the telephone. More and more you see a lot of telephone calls, cell phone calls. In person is the traditional way of doing it, where we sit down and face to face in the same room. But that's more expensive, more difficult. It's more difficult to track the person, to find. It's more time consuming. You have to travel, most likely, and so it's less convenient. So most of this quantitative, large sample research gets done either over the telephone, or maybe online, or using all the different modern technologies to do that. People do stuff with sort of texting, and various things, of course, like these online surveys and all that. So there's various types, but what all these have in common is a standard list of questions and a standard list of answers, right? So that's what all these have in common. Now, of course, nowadays there's a lot of these sort of kind of robocalls. You can have an automated phone call. Instead of talking to a live human being, you could be asked questions by basically a computer. And so you want to talk about standardized. That's standardized when the computer's talking to you on the phone. And so this gets referred to, the various technologies that are computer assisted, is computer assisted personal interviewing, or CAPI, and telephone interviewing, CATI. And so you can either have, there's various technologies we're talking about here. Maybe I'm talking to you as a live human being, I'm talking to you, but I'm using a computer to help go through the questions. I'm following the schedule on my own personal computer and maybe asking you questions over the phone, and then I'm entering the data. all the way from that to a computer that is asking you questions, over the phone. It's all automated, and your answers are being automatically recorded and automatically turned into data potentially. And so you can get a more efficient, when you have technology assisting you, it tends to make things more standardized, more uniform, which we've talked about how that can be good, more efficient, less time consuming, quicker, easier, more. And then also a big advantage too is if it's done in a way where the data gets recorded immediately, then there's less room for error there, because you give the answer, it goes right into a database, it's saved as data, saved, maybe it's translated into a number, saved in some database somewhere, some file. Well, look at that. There's not much room for human error there of entering the data by hand. It's done in an automatic way, and so a good way to reduce error in your data. So all of this technology tends to help with this stuff. Quicker, easier, more convenient, more efficient, maybe more accurate, potentially less expensive over the long term anyway. Okay, now a few points about telephone interviewing. Quicker, cheaper, no travel required. Very big deal, because money is a very important issue in research. We usually don't have as much as we'd like to do research. It's also easier to monitor and evaluate because you can record the telephone call and people can check that recording later to find out if you did a professional job as an interviewer. Did you treat the person right? Did you do it as you were supposed to, or did you screw up and do things improperly? So you can check and monitor the behavior of the interviewers and how the whole interview went. And also over the telephone, it can be an advantage in that it can be kind of more impersonal, where it's not a face-to-face thing, and so it can be a little bit more impersonal. The problem with face-to-face is if I come across to you in a certain way, I may influence your answers. My nonverbal cues, the look on my face, the look in my eyes, the tone of my voice. Now, the tone of the voice will come through on the telephone, and that's why these automated computer calls are kind of good, because they don't have the different tone of voice. It's the exact same tone of voice every time. But the idea here is you want to try to get as much of the interviewer's personality out of it, and so automation and technology tends to help with that. Okay, but there are problems that, although it's not too much of a problem nowadays, you do have some people who can't be reached, who don't own a telephone, who never answer their phone. And that's a big one, is that people see some number that they don't recognize, they just won't pick up the phone, whether it's landline phone or cell phone or whatever. That's a big problem. Also, people are very busy. Even for a telephone call, they have limited time, and you're a stranger, so you may not have the rapport, meaning the kind of positive, friendly relationship with them to be able to get them to be willing to participate in your interview. So that's kind of a problem. So it's just a cold call, calling a call from somebody that is a total stranger, and with total surprise and no preparation or anything like that. And also, if you are talking to somebody on the phone, you, as the interviewer, you can't see their face, and so sometimes your face might show confusion that they need a little explanation, they need a little support, a little prompting, a little, finding out what's going on and help them come up with the right, accurate answer. You can't do that as well over the phone. You can pick it up maybe through the voice, but the face helps the body, the facial cues and all the body, nonverbal communication. You don't have that over the phone. And it may be a less satisfying experience for the interviewee, and that's just impersonal. And sometimes if you're sitting down with somebody face to face, it might be, depends how it goes, it might be more enjoyable. Let's see, we're 14 minutes in. Let's stop right there.